So 5 years ago, nobody knew what a podcast was. Do you remember we'd walk around and be like, we have a podcast, and people would be like, what's that?
Welcome to Breaking Down Your Business, episode 300.
No.
You can find the show notes of this episode at breakingdownyourbusiness.com.
I wasn't ready. Why do you start without me?
300.
I'm a co-host. 300.
Right?
300 and I'm complaining at the head of the whole thing?
Exactly. What's the matter with you?
We've
Who
come
are
a
you
long way,
after
and yet
all?
we've gone nowhere at all.
Who are you?
Oh, I'm Jill Salzman from the Founding Moms.
And I'm Brad Ferris from Anchor Advisors.
Took me a second.
And this is episode 300.
Could you do that louder? For
Okay, so I tried to do some research to try to figure out like what percentage of podcasts make it to episode 300.
Oh.
And I couldn't figure it out.
You couldn't find
but
any
it's not
data,
very
huh?
many.
You couldn't find
it's
any
not
data?
very many.
Let's go with our guts on this one.
Yeah.
Not very many.
Not very many.
See how the gut can work, Brad? It's not always about data. Just want to get that out there before we dive into other topics.
So last time we talked about how we keep our creative output high.
Yep.
And this time I want to answer another question that I get a lot of times is like, how do you guys do your podcast? Like, how did you make it to episode 300?
Do you actually get that question?
I do, actually.
You really do?
Yeah.
Oh.
People are interested.
Oh.
And mostly they say, well, Brad, should I start a podcast?
Ooh, what do you tell them?
I tell them, no, probably not. No, definitely not. No, I think
Really?
you shouldn't.
Why? We're having so much fun.
We are
shouting
having
at each other.
We are having a lot of fun. That is the positive.
So then what's the no part of that?
How much business has the podcast brought you in 300 episodes, Jill?
Perhaps 4%.
Yeah,
I made that up.
Maybe I've gotten one client. And do we get a lot of feedback? What's it like to make a podcast for your audience?
So I want to tell you a little bit about my marathon running days and how the first marathon I ever ran was in Santa Clarita, California,
Okay.
and there was just no one there. My dream growing up watching the New York Marathon was to just have the cheers.
Yes.
As you go every
Right.
mile, just people
Right.
just woo going. And I ran the Santa Clarita, and for 99% of it, there was just no one on the sidelines. And I thought the sole reason I trained for this I just didn't know.
So
I
what you're
had to
saying is
I had to do another one again, and fortunately in Detroit there are people on the sidelines. I'm saying that I expected with this podcast
Yes.
we just have a Detroit situation, but in fact we have a Santa Clarita situation.
that's exactly right. that was a long way to say.
That really was a very long way to
that
say.
podcasting is a little bit
nothing.
like standing on the
Nothing.
balcony of a high-rise shouting into the wind.
Well, we have iTunes reviews.
Sure, right.
Maybe 20
That
of
tell
them
you
in 300 episodes.
62.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh.
But,
Thank you, 62 people.
one of them
Love
says
you.
how fake you are.
One of them talks about how
And-
you're not funny and worth listening to
Exactly.
at all. So those are really helpful.
So 60.
Yeah, I do get feedback from time to time from people who will email me and say, or I'll bump into them at a coffee shop. Jill, I heard you say this on the podcast, and every time I'll go, wait, we have a listener? There's someone listening?
And they're, dear listener, we value you. We love the fact that you're listening. We just don't hear back from anybody very often.
And it's funny that you are like, well, I downloaded, I listened to it. Some of you go, I've listened to every episode you guys have. And you know what? That's lovely, but it's in a vacuum because we are in the other vacuum and we need you to come into our vacuum with us. My metaphors today, incredible.
Are vacuous.
They
My point, when people ask me, should I start a podcast, and I say no, like there's about 100 easier things to do
For
to
what
gather
purpose,
an audience
to
than a
get an audience.
podcast. Podcasts are hard to spread. They're hard to get the word out about.
I'm going to
They're
play
hard
devil's
to get
advocate.
feedback on.
I've got to play devil's advocate. We started 5 years
Play?
ago.
You're playing
You're
devil's
right.
advocate?
I'm going to be the devil. So 5 years ago, nobody knew what a podcast was. Do you remember we'd walk around and be like, we have a podcast, and people would be like, what's that?
How do I download it?
I don't know where to go. Do you listen to that or watch that? So if people want to start one now, it's much easier to. People get what you're doing.
But I think that makes it
also
worse.
can get lost.
That's my point.
There are too many
There's
podcasts.
too many. Like at this point, if someone hasn't started a podcast, I tell them just go be a podcast guest.
Oh, for sure.
Go be on everybody's podcast.
For sure. Come on to our podcast and be a guest.
Anybody, any podcast.
Yeah, because the ones with head starts, I guess that's how we could put it, have a slight advantage over others. But if, as a co-host experiencing no feedback whatsoever, It's a little bit soul-crushing, to be perfectly honest, guys. Not putting any blame on you. We're just putting all the blame on you.
Now, I don't want to be a big downer here because we did get contacted.
That's basically what this podcast has made us. It's two Debbie Downers who are just pooping all over the listeners.
We did get calls from 2 different television producers who wanted to turn us into a reality show.
That's very true. I forgot about that.
And that was fun for like a hot second.
Notice how I blocked it. Yeah, that was really fun.
But that was cool.
No, that was fun.
And I think we've gotten a couple speaking opportunities.
We've had a number of sponsors throughout the years.
We have, which is rewarding.
It has been rewarding. I don't know. The most rewarding thing is actually doing the podcast. So if you have a lot to say about your own business or you have business advice and no one is listening to you, this is an excellent outlet.
Now, having said all that, if you're still determined to start a podcast, because I have this conversation with people and they go do it anyway. So, I would say you need to think about your topic very carefully. And
why?
I think that the biggest mistake that you and I have made is that our topic is too broad.
It is if you want to. I mean, it is and it isn't. I think people like the variety.
I think that's what people say about their spouse's butt.
No.
Is it too broad?
Well,
it is and it isn't.
If you just want to learn about marketing, we're too broad. But if you want to learn about all things small business, we cover a wide variety. We are less boring than some podcasts I know that are just about branding, for example.
For sure.
So in the middle. I guess that's not the issue I have with us, but
you have an issue with us?
I have an
issue.
We have issues? I have an issue.
What's our issue?
Is that we, over time, have been, I guess it's not an issue with us, but we've been unable to get enough feedback to know sort of where to go. So we've changed the format over time.
I don't think that's an issue. I think that's us actually getting better and honing our voice.
You're so positive today.
After I told everybody never to start a podcast. No, but I think when I'm talking about topic, I think that you need to find a topic in which you have a lot of deep knowledge. And there's something that you have to teach and to share that knowledge with other people.
But what if you want to be like that woman whose name I can't remember right now, who's married to the guy whose name I can't remember right now, who makes movies? She has one where she's just like talking and messing up with the sound stuff, and it's exceedingly boring. I can't stop listening to her.
Okay, wait a minute. She's exceedingly boring. You can't remember her name,
Correct.
And you can't stop listening to her.
She's on Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
I'm not. Forget this example means nothing to me.
Comedian.
Goodbye. We're not talking about this anymore.
See, you can have a podcast where your podcast co-host just dismisses everything you say.
You don't have any point. There's no point to that.
My point is there are some very successful podcasts where they don't pick a topic, where there is no substance.
If
what about
you're
the guy
a celebrity,
who lets people fall asleep? There's a podcast out there you can listen to. It helps you fall asleep. He's so boring. You know what I mean? So you're talking about for business owners who want to give business advice.
Or people, if you're not a celebrity,
you
better have something to share. You better have some value to
Better
give.
way to say it. Fine.
Okay.
I'll let you pass. Give me $200.
Second thing, don't try to figure out all the audio stuff.
Please don't.
I see lots of people spending a lot of time looking for the right microphone and just find somebody that knows about audio stuff and say,
I have something simple for this one. I just listened to a new podcast. I'm not going to name it. It's from a woman I know who lives in Chicago. She's a lovely woman. I'm not going to name her. She gives amazing advice. She decided to record a podcast through her laptop. She purchased a mic she had learned about. When you listen, there's an
oh, no.
over the whole 41 minutes or whatever. And I was like, oh, this is a bad recording. Let me go to another one. And I'm sure it's not going to be there. Every freaking... And it's not that loud. It's like a very light, but you can't not hear it kind of techie sound. And I messaged her and I said, look, I love you. I think you're amazing. This is embarrassing that I'm telling you this. Because she's very powerful in her area.
Yep.
But your sound sucks and you need a new mic. And she got back to me and said, thank you so much. You know, I went out and I bought this wonderful mic. I think it's just a laptop issue. I think from the tone of her message, she's not going to fix it. Not going to fix it.
Hire someone to fix your audio.
Please.
Good audio makes a huge difference.
We have engineer recommendations if you're looking for one.
Yes.
Yes.
And I will say, if you want to do video or a blog, the same thing is true.
I've never watched a video podcast.
Well, but you've watched a video. There are
Have
people.
I?
There are people that want to be YouTubers, and they spend weeks and months trying to figure out what the right camera is and what the right lighting and the right. Just start making videos. Just start making recordings.
Do you think we could just repurpose videos from MTV?
Yeah, I think
into
that
a
would
podcast?
work. Sure.
We wouldn't get sued.
Well, it depends on how much editing we do.
Okay.
So the technical stuff, don't get caught up in the details on the technical stuff. Go make something. The other advice that I give that that we didn't follow, I'll put it this way.
Is this the 10 one?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. You love saying
The
this
first
one.
thing you want to do is make 10 podcast episodes. Then throw them away and start making podcast episodes. Because your first 10 podcast episodes are terrible.
Yeah, you guys are planning a lot. You're thinking about it. You're practicing it. Just do the thing. And you can record one and hit delete. It doesn't matter. But
or just keep it for later, but just never use it. Like, you don't have to delete
never
it.
use it. We still have our first 10 on iTunes.
Don't go listen to those podcasts.
But we never deleted it, so I don't know why you give that advice. You didn't do it yourself. It's an easy thing. Just go delete, Brad. 300 episodes.
Okay.
But then we'd have to say 290 episodes. And then
No,
we'd
I'm
mess
going to
up
take
the
off
whole
the
300.
first 100.
What?
I'm going to get rid of the first 100.
Actually, it's true. We have gotten better over the years. And you will too. Wait a second. Why are we advising them on how to do their podcast if your first suggestion was don't do a podcast?
Because everyone ignores me when I tell them that.
Got it. Okay. All right. I like it. The other thing you can do to get to know your voice is schedule yourself within a very short time span to be a guest on several podcasts.
This is the best advice ever. You should listen to this.
To know how you, A, sound, B, interact and think on the fly, because there are a lot of people who start out, and I'm going to now imitate 3 different podcasts I listened to yesterday at the beginning. Hey, everybody. It's Jill. I'm really excited to be talking to you this week from the Boring Podcast. And I clearly didn't think it through, but I know you're probably going to stay with me.
Okay, people have left the podcast now, Jill.
Exactly. That's my point.
Yeah.
Is that even if you put it on 2 times speed, it's so easy to move from one podcast to another. You know what I mean? That's why Brad shouts so loudly at the beginning of this one.
When you watch TV shows, the characters on the TV show are characters, right? Real people aren't like that. On your podcast, you need to amp it up. You need to bring your character. And that doesn't mean not being authentic. It means being more authentically you than you would be in face-to-face.
Well, you don't have to amp it up Brad level. But you
yes,
do.
you do.
You just
you do.
I don't think amp it up because a lot of people are less
it's not
extrovert
about volume.
than we are.
It's not about volume.
That's
but
what I'm saying.
You have to have some personality.
Don't
You have to have some
amp
character.
it up. Just make sure you're your best, fullest self who speaks slightly faster than usual, because otherwise we're going to be bored. And by the way, if you want an example of the fastest speaking person on the podcast landscape or in it, go listen to Getting Curious with Jonathan Van Ness, the star of Queer Eye, who I've never heard anybody speak as fast as him. And to be honest, it's a little bit jarring. It's so fast and you sometimes can't understand what he's saying. But it's so fast, it is definitely engaging the whole time. So that's sort of an extreme example if you want a good example.
So one more thing.
Shout out to JV.
That I have, and then maybe Jill has the closing thought. I don't know. You need to have an audience in mind. And I talked about this a little bit on the last podcast. This is not about creating content. This is not about promoting. It's not about selling something. This is about helping people. And you need to have an audience in mind that you're helping and make sure that what it is that you're putting out there is actually helpful.
And if you're sitting there asking yourself, well, how can I be helpful? Or what on earth do I have to say that would be helpful? That is why we are encouraging you to go and hit record on your little iPhone voice recorder. Practice saying things. Perhaps even send it out to a couple friends. And even though you might think you know nothing and you can't help people, you certainly know things that other people don't, and you can help them out. You just need to figure out your way of doing it.
Awesome.
We crushed it.